Welcome to Fun Facts Daily, your source for just the good stuff. Monday through Friday, we're bringing fun facts and news you can use, all carefully curated to uplift and inform. So give yourself a break, relax, and learn something awesome in just a few minutes every day. Hi everyone, I'm Kyle Wood, and today we're going to be learning all about the book Lord of the Flies. This one actually came as a listener request, and if there's something you want to learn more about, you can suggest a topic by emailing me at funfactsdailypod@gmail.com or leave a comment on Spotify if that's where you listen. Now, as always, before we get into the facts, let's warm up our brains with a little challenge to see if you can tell fact from fiction. Consider this. Some say, before becoming one of the most famous novels in the 20th century and a staple in classrooms worldwide, the manuscript for Lord of the Flies was rejected by publishers over 20 times. What do you think? Is this an actual fact or just too good to be true? We'll find out at the end of the episode. Now for your word of the day. Our word for today is microcosm. That's M-I-C-R-O-C-O-S-M. A microcosm is a community, place, or situation regarded as encapsulating in miniature the characteristic qualities or features of something much larger. When literary critics and teachers discuss William Golding's famous novel, they almost always describe the island where the boys are stranded as a microcosm. By isolating a small group of children on a deserted island, the author created a perfect contained environment to explore massive global issues like government, society, and human nature. The island itself acts as a miniature version of the adult world that was simultaneously tearing itself apart in a global war. The word microcosm comes from the medieval Latin phrase microcosmos, which was directly borrowed from the Greek words mikros, meaning small, and kosmos, meaning world or order. Ancient Greek philosophers originally used this concept to describe human beings as miniature, self-contained representations of the entire universe, connecting the biology of a person to the stars in the sky. Today, we often use the word microcosm not just in literature, but everyday life to describe how a small event or a single community can perfectly reflect the broader structures and systems in the world. Time for your daily high five, our top 5 fun facts about Lord of the Flies. Number 1. Before winning the Nobel Prize in Literature, William Golding worked as a middle school teacher using his daily interactions with unruly boys as inspiration for his characters. Long before he became an internationally celebrated author or won the Nobel Prize in Literature, William Golding worked at a much more ordinary job. He was a school teacher. He taught English and philosophy to young boys at Bishop Wordsworth's school in Salisbury, England. It gave him a front row seat to the daily antics of adolescence. It was this exposure to the rowdy, unfiltered behaviors of middle schoolers that allowed him to write his characters with such incredible realism and psychological depth. He spent hours observing how young boys formed cliques, asserted dominance over one another, and navigated the established social hierarchies of the schoolyard. Golding said he even conducted a few sort of informal sociological experiments in his classroom to see how his students would manage themselves without adult supervision. In one occasion, he divided his class into 2 groups and instructed them to debate a topic, then stepped back to see what would happen. Within minutes, it devolved into total chaos, with the boys shouting over one another and forgetting all the rules of proper debate. This showed Golding that the thin veneer of civilization requires constant upkeep. Number 2. William Golding wrote Lord of the Flies as a direct response to a highly idealized 19th century children's novel called The Coral Island. William Golding was reading a popular children's adventure novel called The Coral Island to his own children when he suddenly became frustrated with its highly unrealistic optimism. In that older story, written by R.M. Ballantyne, three polite British boys are shipwrecked but easily conquer their island, build a civilized society, and have a grand, jolly adventure. Golding realized that real children, especially the energetic schoolboys he interacted with every day, would never act so perfectly proper if left entirely to their own devices. He asked his wife if it would be a good idea to write a story about boys stranded on an island who behave the way they actually might in real life, or at least the way he thought they would in real life, and she encouraged him to try it. To make his literary critique as clear as possible, Golding borrowed specific elements from the Coral Island to turn the classic adventure trope completely upside down. He took the names of the two main characters, Ralph and Jack, from Ballantyne's novel to serve as the protagonists in his own grittier survival story. While the original Ralph and Jack act as best friends to effortlessly conquer every obstacle together, Golding's version quickly become bitter rivals representing the opposing forces of democracy and dictatorship. By twisting this beloved childhood classic, he was able to deliver a powerful message about the fragility of civilization and people's natural instincts. Number 3. The famous horror author Stephen King was so inspired by Lord of the Flies, he named his famous fictional town Castle Rock after a location in the novel. If you're a fan of modern thriller stories, you've no doubt encountered the profound influence that William Golding has had on contemporary literature. Stephen King has cited Lord of the Flies as his favorite book of all time and the work that inspired him to become a writer. King read the novel when he was young, and he was captivated by how honestly Golding portrayed the complicated, often messy nature of children. To pay homage to his literary hero, Stephen King adopted a location from the island map to use as his own expansive fictional universe. In Golding's novel, Castle Rock is the name of the rocky outcrop where Jack and his hunters established their primitive tribal fortress. King borrowed this name as the fictional town in Maine that serves as the primary setting for many of his most famous novels, including The Dead Zone and Cujo. King also showed his love for the book when he penned a heartfelt introduction for the special centenary edition of Lord of the Flies. Number 4. A real-life group of boys stranded on an island in 1965 kind of proved the novel wrong. They worked together peacefully for over a year. While Golding's novel presents a rather grim view of what he thinks would happen when children are left to their own devices, an actual event kind of proved his pessimistic theory wrong. In 1965, 6 teenage boys from the island nation of Tongan essentially lived out the plot of the novel when they borrowed a fishing boat and were caught in a terrible storm. They ended up shipwrecked on a remote, uninhabited island where they were forced to survive completely alone for 15 months. But instead of forming competing factions and fighting each other like the boys in the book, these real-life castaways worked together. The Tongan teenagers set up a highly functional micro-society with fair rules, equal distribution of labor, and a deep commitment to taking care of one another. They managed to keep a single fire burning continuously for over a year, set up an effective rainwater collection system, and even took turns treating a boy who had broken his leg. When they were finally rescued by an Australian sea captain named Peter Warner, the boys were in excellent physical health and remained incredibly close friends. This heartwarming true story serves as a beautiful, uplifting counter-narrative to Golding's fiction. It's a nice reminder that human beings are just as capable of extraordinary cooperation and love as they are of conflict. And our fifth and final fun fact for today: The novel's famous, almost poetic title, Lord of the Flies, was actually a suggestion by the editors after they didn't really care for the original title, Strangers from Within. The unforgettable title, Lord of the Flies, is known all around the world today, but it was almost published under a completely different and far less catchy name. When William Golding first submitted his manuscript to various publishing houses, he titled the work Strangers from Within, which editors found to be too vague and uninspiring. The manuscript eventually landed on the desk of Charles Monteith, a new junior editor at the publishing house Faber and Faber, who saw immense potential in the story despite some flaws. Monteith worked with Golding to revise the text, and he suggested they change the title to something more evocative that captured the essence of the story. Another editor at the firm, Alan Pringle, is often credited with officially suggesting the title Lord of the Flies during these revision and brainstorming sessions. The new title was brilliant because it kind of works on multiple levels. It's the literal English translation of Beelzebub, a figure from ancient Philistine and biblical mythology. This translation perfectly captured the symbolic core of the novel, representing the physical pig's head on a stick, as well as the abstract wilderness that the boys discovered hiding within themselves. By adopting this powerful mythological reference, the publishing team helped elevate Golding's simple survival story into a profound, timeless allegory that continues to captivate readers today. Now for some news you can use. If you ever find yourself trying to manage a chaotic family meeting, noisy classroom, or a difficult team working in another context, you can actually borrow a highly effective communication trick from Golding's novel, the conch shell method. In the book, the boys use a conch shell as a symbol of democratic order, establishing a rule that only the person holding the shell is allowed to speak. You can easily implement this strategy designating a specific object, a talking stick, special mug, or even a shell as an official speaking token. Making an agreement that everyone must listen quietly until the object is passed to them instantly transforms a frustrating argument into a structured, respectful conversation. This works because it prevents people from interrupting one another and promotes active listening. When you're holding the designated object, you feel a sense of validation and you're more likely to speak calmly, knowing that you have the floor and the opportunity to be heard. A lot of frustration comes when people feel like they aren't understood or they aren't given a fair chance to make their case. Constant interruptions raise the volume and the tension in the room, and when people's emotions are running high, they act more on instinct rather than thinking logically about the points being made. When you accept that you cannot speak without the object, your brain shifts from trying to formulate your next objection or interruption to actually processing what the speaker's saying. The slower and more orderly process helps the speaker and the listeners to be able to think rationally, empathize, and build consensus. Finally, the moment you've been waiting for. At the beginning of the episode, I asked, could it be true that William Golding's now famous manuscript was actually rejected over 20 times? Well, that's a fact. Before becoming a widely beloved literary classic, Strangers from Within was tossed into the rejection pile by 21 different publishing houses who just didn't understand or see the potential in the unique premise. The legendary note from the reader at Faber and Faber specifically dismissed the early draft as, quote, absurd and uninteresting fantasy and, quote, rubbish and dull. Fortunately for literary lovers everywhere, junior editor Charles Monteith rescued it from the discard pile, championed the story, and helped shape it into the masterpiece we all love today. Now, I hope you enjoyed learning a bit about Lord of the Flies with me today, and be sure to tune in every weekday for even more fun facts. Fun Facts Daily is an Airwave Media podcast. It was written, recorded, mixed, and edited by me, Kyle Wood. Thanks for sharing a part of your day with me. Be sure to follow Fun Facts Daily on your favorite podcast app so you can keep the good stuff coming your way every day. And if you like the show, please do me a favor and leave a kind rating, review, or just tell your friends about it.